HMTV Matters.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am your host, Dana Arshan Kraslow, and this is the Dana Download. It's a series where I introduce you to all different incredible people from all walks of my life, from broadcast journalism to my weird hobbies to Holocaust and everything in between. I'm really excited to introduce you to our guest today. His name is David Reckess, and he is the executive director of 3GNY, which we'll tell you all about in just a moment. David, thank you so much for coming on.
It's great to be here. It's nice to see you, Dana.
So, complete transparency, my colleague Bernie Fershpan, who's HMTV's executive director, was supposed to do the interview, and last minute he asked me to take over. And when I heard it was you, I couldn't say no, but I had no makeup today whatsoever. I had to, and I'm wearing this, I'm very casual. So my executive director at HMTC, Bali Lerner, gave me her makeup. So I'm wearing just a little bit. And I'm here for you. But I really didn't want Bernie to do it. I wanted to speak to you. And I'm so excited to tell everyone about how we go way back.
We sure do. It's a real treat for me, too. I was excited to come and talk with Bernie, and this just takes it up an extra notch to be able to have this conversation with you, Dana.
Amazing. So what's your first memory of how we met? And then we'll talk about 3GNY and everything that your incredible organization stands for.
You were one of the first people that I met through 3GNY because soon after I joined the organization in this role as executive director, I was asked to take part in one of our We Do Wednesday programs, which is a virtual webinar series where we feature one of our 3G volunteers sharing their grandparents' story with our community audience. And just a few weeks after I started in this role, you were our featured speaker. And I got to introduce you to our larger community. And so through that interaction, I got to know you a little bit. I got to learn all about Poppy and your incredibly beautiful connection with him and the story that you share about him and how many students and community members you've influenced and have introduced Poppy to, and built those connections with so many more people. And so that experience was really informative for me in learning just what strong power and potential this work has and the ways that we as 3Gs get to bring our grandparents to a wider audience, introduce them as people, as someone to care about, as well as to share their stories from the Holocaust and the lessons that we take from them to help inspire other people. And so, Dana, you were really one of the first people to show me an example of how this can be done so well and in such a moving and inspiring way. And every time we get to work together since then, it brings me right back to that, that really early, earnest moment of understanding, oh, this is something really special that we get to do together.
Thank you so much. I remember that night so well. I mean, how could I ever forget? But I feel like we had hundreds of people on. My family from all over the world was watching. I got very emotional when I talked about my Poppy and how my daughter, her Hebrew name is after his younger brother who perished. And that was so meaningful. And I'm so grateful that you have done such wonderful things with 3GNY. So tell us what 3GNY is. And for anyone who isn't familiar with me and my work, this is actually only my 4th episode of the Dana Download. I am a grandchild of an Auschwitz concentration camp survivor, my Poppy. His name was Nat Ross, or Newson Rosenberg, as he was born in Poltusk, Poland. He passed away almost 2 years ago in December of 2023, just shy of his 102nd birthday. So I have dedicated so much of my life to keeping his story alive. I was a news reporter for a long time. I started a Holocaust series at Fox 5, which I took here to the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. And it has been just so amazing being able to work with Dave and 3GNY. And 3GNY really started this entire path for me. And I'll talk about that later. But why don't you tell us what 3GNY is, how it started? And a lot of 3Gs don't even know what the term 3G means. So just educate us.
Yeah, and before I jump into that, Dana, for any of our viewers or listeners who haven't seen you tell your Poppy's story, it's available. That program that you and I did together is on 3GNY's YouTube channel. And folks, I'm sure, can follow Dana on social media and through all of her outlets to find lots of different ways that you've shared his story in such a really beautiful way. So for those who are not familiar, the name of our organization, 3GNY, really tells a little bit of the story of who we are and what we do. 3G is a colloquial term that we use that stands for the third generation descendants of Holocaust survivors. So the survivors themselves were the first generation. Their children, who are our parents, are the second generation. And we as the grandchildren are the third generation, or 3G. The NY is because we're based in New York. We were formed about 20 years ago in 2005 in New York City, really on the heels of a lot of the work that 2G groups, children of survivors, have been doing to gather together, to honor their parents' experiences, to process what it meant to grow up with that legacy, with those memories, with survivor parents. And for the third generation coming up with survivors as grandparents, recognize that experience was a little bit different than our parents. Our relationship to our grandparents often was different in how we understood the Holocaust history and experiences that our grandparents had. And so 3GNY was formed and has grown since 2005 into an organization for grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, as well as other descendants and friends and supporters, really with a two-pronged mission. The first being to educate others about the dangers of intolerance. And we use our family stories, like your Poppies, like my grandmother, my Boobies. We use those stories to educate others about the personal impacts, what happens when hate goes unchecked. We know all too well the dangers of what can happen when anti-Semitism, when bigotry, racism, and hatred of any kind is not put in its place, is not rejected outright, and is allowed to fester and grow. And so we share those stories as a way to help other people connect with Holocaust history, find meaning in it, and help understand the importance and the relevance for today to inspire all of us to speak out against hatred.
And that's exactly what we do at HMTC also. And it's such a beautiful partnership. And I know you and I have been exploring over the past year ways that we can do more and collaborate together. And I really hope that we can come up with some ideas. I know we're on the right path, and I'm so grateful to have, one foot in with 3GNY and to be here as well. It's really special. I want to ask you in a moment about your Bubby story and your personal 3G connection, but I wanted to share just something really beautiful. I know you learned a little bit about it at my presentation, but one of 3GNY's most incredible programs is We Do, which stands for We Educate. And students are, not students, 3Gs like myself, are trained on how to go into classrooms and share their grandparents' stories in the most concise and relatable way. And I created my Poppy's story is so intense, just like all of our grandparents are. He survived Auschwitz, he survived the Death March, he survived another forced labor camp where he had to dig his own grave, both parents and 5 siblings murdered, and somehow I told his entire story in 15 minutes. And it is such an impactful presentation, and I would have never been able to do this without 3GNY. And even when I recorded my first one, and even when I have to share his story, I go back and I watch my first ever 3GNY presentation. So what I would do, actually, I used to bring my Poppy and my grandma into the classrooms with me. And we would do it, I think a few times in Queens, once in Brooklyn. And I'd say to the students, oh, don't mind those people in the back of the room. They're my family friends who just happen to live in this neighborhood. So the kids would see an old couple. They wouldn't pay them any attention. And I would tell them about my Poppy and tell them about the number that was tattooed on his arm in Auschwitz and the entire story of his life. And at the very end, I would say, I lied to you guys. That's my Poppy sitting back there. And kids would cry. They would run over to him. They would ask to see his arm. And I have so many beautiful photos and moments. And those classroom visits, I think, were my Poppy's proudest moments. Because he always said he knew from then that his story would live on and that his family who was murdered, that their legacy would live on. And I really thank 3GNY for that. So tell me about this We Do program, how it has impacted so many students, and then you can go right into your Bubby story and anything you want to share about why you were so drawn to this role.
Yeah, Dana, I love that story, and what an incredible gift that you were able to give to your poppy and to your whole family, to be able to share his story in such a powerful way and to have him there to hear it. It's an unusual and really incredible gift, not only to the students who got to experience that, but to you and your family as well. My journey to the We Do program and to 3GNY was a little bit different, because mine started with the passing of my grandmother. My Booby, or Booby Sarah, as we called her, she passed away in early 2020 at age 97, and was full of energy and vigor right up until the day she died. Growing up, I always knew that she was a Holocaust survivor, that all four of my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. And for most of my adult life, my grandmother would go into schools herself and tell her story, and she would tell us and my siblings and my cousins and my friends about things that had happened to her. And just about any story she told, even if you're just sitting around the dinner table, always started with, well, during the war, and then, contextualizing everyday events into how it related to her experience during the war. In early 2020, when my grandmother passed away, it was a transitional moment for my whole family, realizing that she was the last of that generation to pass. And that next year, my son Owen was entering 7th grade, and on curriculum night, his English teacher told us that one of the books they would read in class was The Devil's Arithmetic by Jane Yolen, a popular middle school age Holocaust novel. And I all of a sudden realized that if this had been the previous year, I would have called up my Booby Sarah and said, you have to come speak to Owen's class and tell them your story. And she wasn't there to do that anymore. And I very quickly realized that that responsibility was now mine. And Dana, like you, I knew her story. I had told it in bits and pieces to different people, but I had no idea how to do that in a concise and coherent way to a group of 7th graders. And soon afterwards, I found out about 3GNY and about the We Do program and the training, and I signed up right away, and I fell in hook, line, and sinker. Being in a room, in a Zoom screen with 12 other grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, I had never been in a space like that before, surrounded by other 3Gs who have a similar shared identity and background that they were trying to make sense of and turn into something positive to put back in the world. And so that spoke to me really powerfully. And soon after that training, I was very fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to step in as 3GNY's first executive director. And it has been an incredible experience since then, helping to grow the program and engage 3Gs across New York and New Jersey, as well as supporting 3G groups around the country that have been similarly trying to engage 3Gs to share their stories. And through that work, we actually 2 years ago launched a national 3G organization called Living Links, which is a project of the USC Shoah Foundation. And they have taken on what was the We Do speaker training, and are now managing the speaker training program to make it available to 3Gs across the country. And so the number of 3Gs who have access to a very purposeful, engaging, peer-led training process to help take their story and turn it into a presentation for a middle school or high school audience. We're now able to reach hundreds of people a year to create more storytellers and ensure that the Holocaust memory continues to not only live on, but to inspire new generations of students to moral action and courage.
It's so important, and I'm very familiar with Living Links too. They're doing such important work. So, obviously we know that we're among the last generation of survivors. The number is dwindling. And we talk about how important it is to hear these firsthand accounts. But why do you think the second and third hand accounts, the 2Gs and the 3Gs sharing, why Is it just as important, would you say? And how do they relate to the students in a different way?
One of the things that I tell our volunteers often is that we're not asking them to tell their grandparents' story. We're asking them to tell their story about their grandparents. And I think that's an important distinction. We shouldn't be trying to replace survivor testimony because we were not there ourselves to witness and experience what was going on or what happened. At the same time, we, in many cases, were direct witnesses to our grandparents recounting those stories and to the daily impact that it had on their lives and who they were. And for us as the third generation, as 3Gs, those stories directly influence who we have become and how we engage in the world. And so our lens as the third generation descendant, as a 3G, our perspective on what that Holocaust memory means for us is essential for audiences today to understand not only the history and the impact of the Holocaust in the 1940s, but its ongoing relevance and importance for today and the lessons that all of us, direct descendants or not, must continue to take from the Holocaust memory. And so we're really, really grateful for the opportunity to share those narratives and to continue that link in the chain of memory transmission from our grandparents, from the people who this happened to us as witnesses. And then, as Elie Wiesel famously said, when you listen to a witness, it makes you a witness. And so as those direct witnesses ourselves, we now have the responsibility, the obligation, and the opportunity to help create a new generation of witnesses in the students that we speak to.
It's amazing what you're doing. And I always say almost every time I speak that if I, the grandchild of a Holocaust survivor, is not sharing these stories, then who is going to do it? Are you starting to train any 4Gs? And I also want to know, in this world with such short attention spans, any techniques that you use to help the education really resonate with the students?
Yeah, one of the unique strategies that we as 3Gs have as a way of connecting with students is that we are there first and foremost to talk about our grandparents. And I love going into a classroom and before getting into the Holocaust, before talking about Hitler and the rise of Nazis and anti-Semitism, I first just tell some stories to introduce students to my grandmother, the person that I knew and loved and the relationship that we had. I tell them about how she was a great dancer and how she would play cards and give cookies to my friends when she would come to visit, and they loved hanging out with her too. And these are really important pieces because they not only humanize my grandmother and help give context to the experiences that she was subjected to during the Holocaust, but what this does is that it helps students understand that these are real people. And I ask students to think about their grandparents, or if they don't have grandparents, another elder in their life who they trust, who they love, who they know cares about them. And we can help the students think about someone important in their life and then relate to them something really vulnerable about someone important in my life, in our lives. And that connection, that drawing on a familiar relationship helps draw students in. And, you mentioned the digital age of short attention spans. Once you start telling a story and you make that personal connection and you give them someone to care about, you can talk as long as you want. You have their attention. They want to know more. They love hearing those stories. And by the end, they feel like they know your grandparent too. I have so many students who come up to me afterwards and say, I love Booby Sarah. I'm so glad I got to meet her through you. I'm going to remember Booby Sarah forever. And that just fills my heart up. That tells me that we are doing something right because we're giving the students someone to think about, someone to care about, someone to hold in their heart as they go through the rest of their life and hear what's happening in the world and inspire them to make choices that are going to make things better.
And I've learned more about Booby Sarah today. I feel like I haven't really heard enough about her, and I love knowing that she was speaking and doing her part to share her survival story. One thing that I did that 3GNY helped me do, I would look out at the students and say, what was the first number that you ever had memorized? Was it a cell number? Was it your house number? And they would all share the number with me. And I'd say, well, my first number was 143499, my Poppy's prisoner number. And 3GNY taught me these techniques. Another one I would do is I'd say, who has ever had to go to the dentist because you've had a toothache? Half the room raises their hand. And I say, well, my Poppy had a hole in his cheek that if he even had any type of liquid, it would come right out. And that was from 3 years of not brushing his teeth and having a tooth infection. So everything I did, I tried to relate back to them. And just the people we trained with were just so wonderful in teaching us that. So anyone listening, if you're a 3G, really, really, really hope that you will consider looking into Living Links and 3GNY and support them any way you can. We have about 4.5 minutes left, so I'd love to get a little more information from you about how would you say that, and I know we do a lot of this at HMTC, how are you using Holocaust education at 3GNY to relate it to broader issues of hate and prejudice and intolerance and bullying, if that is something that you're doing?
Absolutely. There are so many lessons that can be taken from every single Holocaust story and narrative. Many of them boil down to that our grandparents were treated in these horrific ways, and in many cases had family members killed, murdered in front of them. Their lives were upended for no reason other than the fact that they were who they were, that they were Jewish, and they were targeted just for being who they are. And that message is something that resonates really strongly with students. They understand how dangerous it can be to treat someone badly just for being who they are. And at the same time, many of our stories, and my Booby Sarah story in particular, are full of small moments where somebody took a risk, somebody acted with courage, somebody acted out of love or compassion, and did something small to help. And I always underscore for students that, some of the challenges that we see on the global scale, it can be hard to think about a global solution. But what my grandmother proved to me is that what helped her survive were the small things that people did on a day-to-day basis. There was a gentleman on a train who convinced the Nazi soldiers walking down the train aisles to keep walking and not to ask my grandmother for her papers. That little act saved her in that moment. There was her boyfriend at the time who pushed her out towards a chance of escaping the ghetto while he himself stayed behind to help his mother. And so he physically pushed her away from him because he knew that it was the best chance for her to survive.
What happened to him?
He ended up being killed at Majdanek. And for the bulk of the war, my grandmother and her parents survived in hiding, being hidden and saved by a Polish Catholic family. And that act of heroism and bravery and courage by that family has been a founding principle in my upbringing, in my life. And my grandmother always told the story about how one spring at Easter time, the family was given an extra ration of eggs to bring home for the holiday. And the daughter, who was Booby Sarah's age, came home with the extra eggs and walked right to the back closet where Booby Sarah was hiding and gave her 2 eggs. And she said, "I know it's not much, but I want you to have something special for your holiday too." Because she knew that Easter coincided with Passover and that eggs were an important food for Passover as well. And Booby Sarah told us that story every year at our Passover Seder. And it was a constant reminder that even in the midst of the most horrific acts and time period in our recent memory, small kindnesses like that mean the world to somebody. And so that is a lesson that I always try to impart to the students I speak to, and that many of our speakers share, that there's always something you can do to help. There's always a way to speak up, to speak out, to support people who are being treated differently or treated badly simply for being who they are. And that it is all of our responsibility to find those kindnesses, find that compassion, and create that peaceful world that we want to see.
So beautiful. I wish I could have interviewed and met your grandmother. I'm so sorry I never had that opportunity. So I'm going to leave you with one final question. What is the future of Holocaust education and of 3GNY? Or what would you like the future to be? I guess we'll never know the future. I mean, for me, I think it is the 3Gs and the 4Gs and the 5Gs, right? It's inspiring our generation, our future generations, to keep the stories alive.
Absolutely. I think the future of Holocaust education has to be grounded in those real stories. And the further we get from a world where survivors are with us, are able to share their testimony directly, it is our responsibility to ensure that those personal narratives, those personal stories of courage, of pain, of resilience, of love, that we make sure those stories stay current and continue to be told so that future generations know that this was a real event, it happened to real people, and that all of us have a responsibility to ensure that it does not happen again.
David, thank you so much. I could talk to you forever. We have to do a whole nother episode of just hearing more of your grandma's stories. They're incredible. So I don't have it written down, but I think this is all accurate. To learn more about 3GNY, it's 3gny.org is the website, right? And on Instagram, just handle is 3GNY. And their website really has so many incredible events that are coming up, and you could sign up for their mailing list at the bottom of the website. I send people there all the time. And my dream is, we've talked about this, to have like a gala, like an HMTC 3GNY 3G gala. So maybe we can make that our New Year's resolution and get that happening for next year. But thank you, David. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to know you and to be your friend. And I hope together we just build a stronger, brighter future. And thank you to all of you for listening, for watching. Thank you to Bernie Fershpan, who directed this episode today. Really appreciate your support and everything you do to make sure that HMTC continues to succeed. Again, I'm Dana Arshan-Kraslow for the Dana Download.